right, welcome everyone. We're talking today with Ramneet Brar. Ramneet is co-founder of a company called Isempower that's on a mission to empower international students to thrive in a new country. I've been looking forward to this conversation since she graciously agreed to participate in my little talk show here. So welcome, Ramneet.
Thank you so much for having me here, Bob.
So let's start with an intro. I gave your one-liner there. I'm sure you can do a much better job of articulating kind of the value and maybe a little bit of your elevator pitch on what you're all about and what Eisenpower is all about.
Absolutely. I'll start by again saying thank you for having me on the show and for everyone listening. Quick introduction about myself. I'm the co-founder and COO of Isempower. So I overlook our day-to-day operations, keep the house clean and running, and also lead our higher education partnership side of things. I came to Canada 8 years ago as an international student myself, and having to go through my own journey of finding a co-op within accounting, which I was studying before, really made me realize, the gaps in the market and how unsupported international students are in general. I built a career in tax consulting for about 5 years before I joined forces with Pat, and now currently building Isempower. To summarize this empower in like a few lines, we are a technology solution for higher education institutions, so we can categorize ourselves under edtech, and we work with them to help them provide a scalable support in a tech driven and data driven way to their international student population. And then we also work with employers all across the nation and help them access early talents in forms of co-ops, internships, work integrated learning opportunities, as well as full-time post-grad opportunities through our technology platform, alongside hosting internships, career fairs, mentorship, and other programs that we run outside of our core function. So yeah, that's just a bit about who we are and what I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've given me a lot to sort of pull apart and dig into there. One of the things that I was thinking about too, I actually worked at KPMG for a very short period of time early on, and I'm just curious about, for somebody that's new to the country, I got to believe that landing a job at KPMG out of school, a job at KPMG out of school, essentially on a partner track and deciding to break with tradition and go co-found a startup. How does that happen?
I think that all happened very organically. Even KPMG happened very organically. I wasn't looking to get into Big Four. I didn't even think I could get into Big Four. At that time, Big Four wasn't hiring from college, so they only exclusively hired from universities. So, but I did get into it through a co op, and I built a really great career. But I think as I was growing into it, I realized that this is not the end goal for me. Like a partner track is not the end goal for me. So I knew I wanted to be in somewhere more creative. Isempower happened because of content, and that's why I'm a big fan of content. I was producing content on LinkedIn, helping international students just learn job search journey, and that just built up so quickly within a year. I think I was at like 5 6,000 followers, and people were really connecting with me. That's how I met Pat. Honestly, my co-founder, we never really knew each other. We met on LinkedIn purely through networking, and she was already building Empower. And I got involved into it pretty much thinking this is a non-for-profit, and we are just gonna, create more mentorships or more programs for international students. Never really thought in my wildest dream it would turn into a startup, and we I would end up doing that full time. I'm someone who just believes in taking the next step. I don't really plan my next 10 steps and think like that's when I should do it. I focus on the next step. So I focused on just doing is empowered, and I did that on the side of KPMG for about a year before I made that decision to dive into that full time. And it was a very calculated decision I made as well. I'm a fan of calculated risk, so I assessed all my opportunity. I knew we were building something monumental here. We were changing a full industry, and the impact that we were creating was so much bigger. And we also were at a point where we did see a product market fit, and we had something in hand to work with, and I had enough opportunity that I could let go of a traditional career. Ultimately, I think it was also just something I decided on myself. Of course, leaving a very well settled career in a big company wasn't something I took very lightly. But at that time, letting go of an opportunity to build a startup was much bigger. So I decided to go with a bigger risk. And at the end of the day, your experience never goes away. I have the luxury of having a backup career. So if this doesn't work, I would be very much happy to go back into tax. So yeah, that sort of was my psyche behind how I got into it. But now having to done it for almost a year, I cannot see myself doing anything else but this.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. It's interesting. A couple of things that came to mind as you were talking a bit there. One is just this idea that I've always loved: just trust the timing of your life. I've never subscribed too much to, planning, other than trying to give some thought to, maybe the impact you want to make or what you want from your life. But how you get there is really up. Will unfold the way that your life is meant to unfold, and so that your description of that. That really resonated with me. And now, of course, now having worked with Pat and you for a while, I've got to say, not only super impressive, but I cannot imagine you working in a big five company. So I think, at least for right now, I think it's safe to say you've landed in the right place.
Absolutely.
You also talked about something really interesting there. I'd like to dig into. A lot of founders really struggle, and there's got to be a better name for it, but this idea of product market fit. And you also alluded to the fact that you were pivoting, and Isempower is what you're delivering, and the offerings and even the market has changed a lot. It's such a crowded place, this ed tech space, this recruiting and HR space. So I'd love to hear more about how you found your place in it, or at least the place you thought you had, and how that place has pivoted as you've grown.
Absolutely. I think product market fit is something that's also very overhyped. I
Mm.
honestly feel like you have to change. Change is the only constant, as they say, in any market at any scale, depending on where you are in your company, you're going to have to continue to pivot. And if you are rigid to pivoting, like that's when most of the businesses die because you're so attached to your company being one way that you don't want to see it any other way. So I think for us, since day one, the idea was to support international students, and the idea was for international students to be able to build careers. How we do that was the bigger question that we had in our mind, and we started originally with a boot camp, and we thought we would really much scale this on a B2C basis because we already had a community, because we were a non-for-profit before. We had a community, we already had a social presence, so we had people we were connecting with, we had institutions we were connecting with. But we started with just providing resources and building courses to students so that they can learn how to do job search. And soon we realized as we started running that we couldn't really make a difference until we brought employers in the equation, because what's the point of teaching students how to do job search if people don't want to hire them? So we realized, okay, like we have to bring in employers and we have to educate them on how they can hire international students and what really is the value of that. And I think once we figured that out, then the question became of how we can, start that collaboration between employers and students. So we started with a very basic job board plugin. And then we soon realized, okay, now that we have this and it's really somehow working, we have to build our own technology because we can't really just work on a basic job board. So that's how we started on building our own ed tech. And the idea of that being integrated to higher ed really came from that, is because we could only scale a course so much and we could only scale a job board so much. And when you work in that space, you realize that when we looked at higher education and we looked at the technology they use to provide that solution to international student, all of that is so outdated. Even though it's a crowded space, it's not really a space that has seen a lot of technology revolution. And now that we talk about AI, like it's really far behind to getting to that space. So we saw that gap in the market and we knew what we can do. And it also came from a principle that we didn't wanted students to pay, and we could only scale so much as a company if we don't want students to pay. So somebody has to pay, and here's the people who has to pay then became the higher ed and the employer. So the question really became of how we can implement that and slowly being able to, because me and Pat both are not tech talents, we're not CTOs, we don't come from a software development background. We really come from our own consulting and product management background. So we knew how we can make this into a reality, but we needed someone to do that, and we were able to do it first with an outsourced team and then bring the development in house. So I think, yeah, we just took it step by step into how we can do that. And I think keeping in mind the scalability and the end users was something that really helped us and really helped us shave off of pieces that we weren't able to continue. And we the boot camp that we originally started with, we actually discontinued that 2 months ago because we realized we could take it into a different direction and really go with the ed tech platform and being able to provide that value. So we also have to realize, as I was saying at the beginning, don't get too attached to a particular part of your product, and know when to say goodbye to something, and know when that
Mhm.
something is restricting your growth. Then you can just find a new way to deliver that. But our community, our students continue to remain our core, and everything we do it for them. And I think that's how we have stay true to who we are and what we're trying to solve, but really being able to pivot as we go as to how we try to solve that problem.
Yeah, interesting. When you're, and of course, as you know, the nature of your platform with employers and students, it is that bit of a two-sided marketplace trying to balance that supply and demand, right? And one of the things I'm curious about, because I see a lot of founders encounter this, is when you're coming into an industry, whatever it is, and you're looking to disrupt things, you usually run into these institutional barriers that are either you were kind of blind to them because you didn't know they were there until you tried to disrupt things and change things, or you knew they were there but they're just bigger. And in some cases, you thought you'd have obstacles that turn out to be fairly easy to overcome, but there were these other things you didn't see coming. And so, and usually these come down to just it's just easier. The status quo is just easier. It's this reluctance to change. It's that people don't usually want to change until they're forced to. So I'm curious what barriers you might have encountered as you're looking to really disrupt this space in a way that nothing else has, that you're trying to find your way through.
There's too many. I think our biggest competitor is status quo. Until there's like I feel like there's a knife in your neck, and like there's things that are really pressing. Anyways, making a change, especially in an industry like higher ed, where there's multiple layers of authorization, there's budgets in place, there's it's sort of like a public space, right? It moves slow. The average
Mm,
sales cycle in ed tech is like a year, so it's not a small or like a quick sale to make. So we did realize the value of partnerships very early on, and we've worked over these years to just build all these partnerships with higher ed, with other players that are involved. So we just really try to go in as someone who's trying to educate and support rather than being someone who's trying to make a sale, because ultimately at the end of the day we do have options to collaborate with them even when there's no money involved. So I think it's very hard to enter a space and right away think that you're going to be able to make everyone pay and you're going to be able
mm,
to make the money that you want to make. Like you have to figure out who will be your loss leaders, who are people whose name are just valuable enough for you and you can take a loss on them, but their name would add credibility to your product, and find a way to make that money elsewhere. So for us, since we have two-sided marketplace, that is really helpful for us, that we can continue to gain revenue from one place as we try to build the bigger revenue model, which is the higher ed, and that would move slow. The other thing that we try to do with, especially with our employers, is also find different ways to collaborate with them as well. Like as you said, like the whole HR tech recruitment space is so overcrowded. So I really like Pat's philosophy. Whenever we try to have a meeting with anyone, she always says me like, what gets this person promoted, and you want to hit that place. Like you don't want to just go in and being like, oh, I can do XYZ, and go with a half an hour sales pitch and just show them a presentation and tell them everything. Like in the beginning, I would never have a meeting without presentation. And now I don't even start with a presentation. I want to talk. I want to know what is your pain point, what gets you promoted, what is your motive at the end of the day. And that's where I want to hit, because that's what matters. And ultimately, depending on who you're talking to, it will look really different. So we've been trying to do a lot of that and spend more time on discovery calls, so that we can really understand the motive behind that person, and then be flexible in how you can partner with them. Because there's no, like for 125 employers we have, the partnership we have with each one of them looks very different. And that's sort of, I think, is the solution of why we are working. Because again, we're not too attached to either our product or either the way we do it. We're attached to our students. How we get to that is something that we continue to experiment. And I think that sort of is the secret sauce of just like learn fast, fail fast, adapt fast, and just like keep going, and keep experimenting. And I see that as very, very much fun. Someone who's come from a big four, where things are set in one way, you can't change them, it's just very rigid. I find this to be so much more fun, that this is my company. I don't have to follow a way, I don't have to follow a rule. And that's what I tell my team as well. Of, if you have an idea, you want to implement it, let's talk about it, let's implement it. If it works, great. Doesn't work, we change it. And we that's the beauty of being a startup. And I think that's what is helping us disrupting a space, is that we're just adapting ourselves as to who we talk to, where we are at, and where we go. And until we come to a point where we find a sure shot method, we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, I love that, Ramneet. It's as soon as we bring up a PowerPoint, it changes the conversation, right? So there's value that we can provide with whoever's on the other end of the phone or the Zoom. And as long as we're open and we're obsessing about the problem and how we can provide value to them, and we're not locked into validation bias and sort of gearing towards the canned solution that we've got, I think that's amazing advice. I really, really wish we had more time for this. I knew that I'd have more questions than we'd have time to answer, but I can't thank you enough. Let me ask you one question. This is a bit of a personal thing. What book has impacted your life the most?
Oh, the book "How to Make Friends and Influence People." I think it completely changed the way I interact with people, how I look at arguments. I am someone who was very defensive, and I always wanted to be right. And the moment I've read that book, I'm like, I don't have to be right. I just don't have to be right. So I love that book. Anybody I've met, I was just like, read this book. I continue to reread it every single time. But I think that's a amazing guide. Anyone who's in a public facing space, anyone who is talks to people, you need to read that book. I think it's a great book.
That's amazing, Remy. That would be my answer too. I reread it every couple of years. It's amazing. Thousands and thousands of business books, and yet the one single most valuable book I think is just all about how to relate to people, that was written back in the 30s. So yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. We're going to have a follow up where we can dig into all these amazing nuggets of wisdom you've provided, but I can't thank you enough. Amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bob, for having me, and looking forward to follow up conversation, and looking at your talk show become bigger and really make it into a long form podcast. When you do that, I really want to be back and have like an hour long conversation.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye now.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Bye.